Hey everyone, this is Grant Drawe, the Vice President of Research and Innovation at CAP Index. Today we're going to be discussing how to navigate crime data, going over some Q3 numbers, as well as a broad overview of crime data in the US. We want to touch on the headlines, what we see day in, day out, and might pop up on your phone, email, truly the headlines that can be deceiving. What are you supposed to make sense of? Is crime up or down? We're going to touch on crime data sources in the US and why there's some confusion when you see the numbers. Also, Q3 just ended, so we're going to go over some of our premises data that looks at crime at specific places. At the end, broad conclusion discussing crime data and what to expect going forward. Not surprising, there's headlines all over different newspapers, emails, phones, everything that you see in front of you has crime going a different direction at times. With that, you're being tasked to make sense of what you're seeing, what your supervisor's seeing, and really speak to, is crime going up, down? How are we affected by this? This is truly an example of some of those we see day in, day out. Some of the more comical ones speak to look for ones in Tennessee, best places to live, according to one. And then about a month later, Tennessee is ranked as one of the worst states for quality of life. So you have a lot of these conflicting news stories that pop up, and you're tasked with how to make sense of this. It's really no different than when we think about crime data. So is crime up, down? Why is there so much confusion about this? Really, it comes down to when are we looking at crime data and what are we trying to make sense of it? So when we think about that, crime reporting is inconsistent. Not all police departments report crime. There's no real law requiring crime reporting. So we see FBI numbers. That's the best numbers we can get from law enforcement themselves. Not all crime is reported, both people and businesses. So if you're working at a retailer, what's the likelihood that all crime occurring at your retail establishment makes it to the police? Probably slim. So with that, even when we know crime is occurring and we turn to police for that, it's an incomplete picture of that. Additionally, there's a time lag before info and crime data are made public. Think about the NIBRS data in the US right now. We're into October, November of 2024. We're just seeing data on 2023 crime occurrence across the US. So there is quite a bit of lag when we want to make sense of national estimates with that. And of course, what we'll touch on today, we have FBI data, we have local police department, we have the National Crime Victimization Survey, we have the old UCR SRS system, and the newer NIBRS system as a whole. If we turn to crime data, a lot of us that live in a city probably see local news reports about crime occurring in your area, surrounding cities, everything with that. Local law enforcement agencies do collect crime data. A lot of our larger cities in the US have data portals that have this openly available. Others that don't, you can submit an open records request, a FOIA request. There's a couple of names to it. But with that, it's a mixed bag of what you receive when you request this type of data. It can be calls for service, it can be incidents. It might not be as granular as you'd want or as detailed as you want to really make sense of what's going on in your area. But at the other hand, it is local data that you're getting from a local law enforcement agency, city, county, university, any of those. On the other hand, when crime's not reported to police and we're looking at sort of the dark figure of crime, that amount of crime that goes unreported, a lot of people turn to the National Crime Victimization Survey. It's a household victimization survey trying to get at that dark figure, trying to assess how much crime goes unreported to police. Not shocking, since this is a victimization survey, it's going to exclude homicide itself. On the other end, when we see a lot of the headlines, a lot of agencies are turning to the FBI to get their numbers. Again, crime data are reported by local law enforcement agencies, aggregated up to the FBI. Then the FBI displays these numbers through the Crime Data Explorer, a number of different outlets, but that's the most common one. This is voluntary submitted by agencies to the FBI. And again, keep in mind, only consists of crime reported to law enforcement, so truly missing out on some of those that go unreported. To touch on that part, the NCVS dashboard that you see in front of you are some screenshots that we grabbed to just illustrate the underreporting that comes with crime data itself. So NCVS has an online tool that you can look at these, and what you see in front of you are reporting patterns of victimization. So what you see is victimizations reported to police in 22 and 23. As you can see, over half of the violent crime was not reported to police in 22 or 23. Similar results for property crime goes up quite a bit in terms of how little is reported to police as a whole. But that illustrates when we think about our national crime numbers that we see from the FBI, it's not capturing all types of victimization. Not everyone's always turning to the police. This is kind of the highlight of the NCVS dashboard and what you can drill down into. So when we look at the dashboard, it does give you a lot of filters to look at. On the left, you can see the reason why people are reporting to police, and about 40% just didn't report it to the police at all. Other times when they do, it is for self-protection within that for violent victimization. On the right-hand side, though, if we're looking at violent victimizations not reported to police, you can see that they dealt with it another way, or they just believe that police could not or would not be able to solve it for them. So you start to see what's going on behind the scenes and why people are not reporting it to the police itself. Additionally, they have a lot of different options on the dashboard to work with. On the left-hand side, you can see we separated by region of the US, starting in 2019 to 2023. So if the arrow is going to the right, you see that there is an increase in violent victimization in the Northeast from 2019 to 2023, and that's how you would interpret it. If it's going to the left, there's a decrease over that time span, but you can see there are some regional differences in violent victimization. In the middle, we're introducing by location, so you can look at near a victim's home, a relative's, commercial parking lot, public area, school, or other, and some of the trends across the region itself. Then on the right, if we're just looking at the location itself, so it gives you the option to have one filter or one variable that you're selecting on, or a cross one to see how it differs across, say, location and region. Truly looking at differences across time, but lets you see the trending and victimization patterns. Oftentimes, NCVS is used in conjunction with the FBI, UCR, SRS data, now known as NIBRS going forward, but that's the law enforcement data side. So with that, in 2021, the FBI sunsetted UCR, SRS, so the Summary Reporting Statistics. With that, there was a switch over to NIBRS, the National Incident-Based Reporting System in 2020, and there's been a bit of a lag. Not all agencies were prepared to make that jump into NIBRS data reporting, and we're behind. As you can see in 2022, we just had about 10,500. 2023, it jumps up to about 11,600. We're still behind that in total, about 19,000 agencies in the US. SRS had greater reporting practices across the US, but that's been going on for many more decades than NIBRS has as a whole. With that, though, NIBRS is a great data system itself. Reporting practices to get at more specificity in reported offenses, gets rid of the hierarchy part that the UCR had. So if there was a motor vehicle theft that also had a homicide, with SRS, you would see the homicide itself. With NIBRS, you would get both of those offenses as well. So with that, there is a growth in NIBRS. Great data. I'm a huge fan of this myself. We use it within CAP regularly when we're mapping our data and trying to aggregate it across multiple agencies. But there is a large lack in availability of the data. We're going around to local law enforcement agencies themselves to collect it. The FBI does make this available towards the end of the following year, to where you can go and download and actually look at the data itself. There is just a large lag in auditing the data, going through that process and then making it publicly available. But it is a very rich data set compared to the UCR SRS. So let's get into some of the confusion about crime itself. So typically there's a strong focus on crime and news with a focus on retail. That's making it the headlines nowadays, especially as we come into the holiday season. Retail crime, organized retail crime, is grabbing the headlines left and right. With that, there's visible deterrence from larceny shoplifting. Is seen by many in public, so be it locking up of items in aisles, your guard towers, your cameras, all of that is more visible deterrence, target hardening that we're starting to see. And there also is an interest in kind of the growing loitering, people without housing, homelessness issues at large that come around some of these retail stores itself. So it becomes a broader social context of trying to understand crime at specific locations, businesses with that. Also, when we're thinking about national crime data as a whole, a lot of it speaks to national crime trends. So we're thinking across the US, violent crime or property crimes up or down. But what about within a city or within neighborhoods? Cities can go up and down, but even within a city, if it's going down by 10%, there's still some neighborhoods that might be increasing about the same or decreasing even more than that 10%. So with that, variation exists. So you have to keep in mind, how do I want to look at this? If we're thinking nationally, that's one thing, but there's always going to be variation at another unit of analysis below. And that's where we focus more on a neighborhood effect. Example exists in Dallas, looking at neighborhood level variation in shoplifting. With that, we see a headline: shoplifting in Dallas increased by 73% through the first 6 months of 2023. Cool, great. We know that it went up and increased a lot, but that's across the city. Now, what does it look like within the city when we're looking at it that way? So here we have mapped the change in 2022 to 2023 shoplifting incidents. The block groups that you see in the orangish red is where you saw significant increase, where you don't see any color and it's almost see-through. No significant change at all. And then where you see the green, you actually see a significant decrease in the amount of shoplifting at that time point. So with this, there are Neighborhoods that did see a significant increase that speak to that broader 73, 74% increase. You also have a lot of neighbors that didn't see any change, and you actually have 9 that had significant decreases in the amount of shoplifting. That's where variation exists. That's where you have to think a bit more. Are we affected within one of these neighborhoods? The numbers you see at the city level always don't speak to what you see at the neighborhood level. Additionally, why we like to use Dallas as an example, there was a reporting practices changed in Dallas. The police wanted to focus more on violent crime. So when it came to shoplifting itself, they changed it towards an online form unless there's an apprehension over a certain dollar amount. So the reporting practices of shoplifting changed in Dallas to where retailers, businesses as a whole had to go online and report it itself. Police weren't always going to be dispatched there. So it's where it's important to not only look at the broad numbers of it all, but to also make sense of the local context of what's going on. If you hopped over to the FBI's Crime Data Explorer, these are some numbers that you'd see on one of the main pages. Speaking about the change in crime in 2023 compared to 2022, saw some decreases. Now, if you hopped on to some of their more recent reports, it actually shows that crime did increase some in 2023. That's because when they're looking at the data, and you can see here is last updated in April, this auditing, it's a snapshot in time. So as they collect more data into a calendar year, they can speak more into what's actually going on. It takes a bit of time. So their best estimate is what you see. Give it more time when they collect more data, they can really speak to a better estimate of what was seen and experienced versus an estimate at that time. So truly take it with a grain of salt. Think about when 2024 ends, we're going into 2025. Some of the first numbers we see are going to be attention grabbers. It's going to grab the headlines, but it's going to take a bit of time to really dig into it, audit the data. There could be changes that we're seeing in that. It takes time with that. Additionally, and why I'm a big fan of the FBI Crime Data Explorer, is if we go on there, we can look up any law enforcement agency that's reporting data to the FBI. So here I selected it based on just the state of Arizona. And you can see here that dip in the graph that you see is in 2021. That's when the NIBRS transition took effect. So you see in that calendar year, the reporting coverage for the state of Arizona dropped quite a bit, picks back up in 22, but that's where that transition from UCR SRS to now NIBRS went into effect. So you see that dip there, and where a lot of agencies and states are still trying to catch up with their RMS system as a whole. It's taking time and effort. Think about it internally to your business itself. If you're changing your incident management system, it's not an easy task. It doesn't happen overnight. And the same goes true for law enforcement agencies. The financial burden, everything that comes with it, it takes a bit of time. And for NIBRS, they have to be certified with that. Another good example of this is still in Arizona, focusing on Scottsdale. You can see here it picks up in 2021 with NIBRS reporting. You can see the trend based on month they provide the data to the FBI. So it's showing shoplifting across here. And some of the nice add-ons when you're on the Crime Data Explorer is you can look at it based on a location type, which we'll come back to within our own dashboard, but also secondary offenses. So a lot of people want to know, so you have shoplifting, what else is involved? You have some simple assault here. You have a lot of drug narcotic violations as well. So it is a mix, and that's what perk of NIBRS. It's getting secondary offenses along with the primary offense itself. NIBRS is a huge step forward. At the same time, the FBI also realizes there's a huge time lag in making that data available. So you can't speak to current crime trends with the NIBRS data in the current collection process. Starting of 2024, the FBI did put out quarterly updates. You can see here that there's just under 15,000, so about 14,809 out of the 19,000 law enforcement agencies. Keep in mind those that were reporting NIBRS in 2023 were down in the about 11 to 12,000 range. So there is a lag in NIBRS reporting. For here, the FBI is accepting some of these summary reporting statistics, SRS data, to speak to current estimates. There is a big lag and when you even see the quarterly updates. So through Q2 of 2024, this was made available on September 30th. So there is still a lag, but at least it's a better snapshot of what's going on across the US. What you see in front of you are truly the two options you have on regionality of it. Are there differences across crime types in the US, but also cities and population structures? So you can select a crime, and then you'll see an update based on the region or by population group based on that. So it gives some freedom, but not a ton of detail to look into it. Because there's not a lot of detail in that, we have a lot of customers and clients coming to us and asking, well, what does crime look like across some of our different industries or verticals within business sectors? There's a lot of big cities, like we mentioned before, that have data portals online where we can assess and look at their data. There are 14 cities that we regularly use, collect data from on each quarter, clean up a little bit, and then make available to look at trends across year to year, quarter to quarter. We've developed a Power BI dashboard that makes it a bit easier for us to look at that and update on the regular. The 14 cities you see in front of you are common ones, larger cities across the US. There's probably another handful out there that we could get. It's just the reporting practices have shifted so much from quarter to quarter. We've kicked a few out currently. They might get added in down the line. With that, though, while we select these 14 cities, they also have a location category that's reflected in NIBRS. So we can look at residential, hotel, motel, healthcare, restaurant, financial, and retail. You can see in the restaurant, financial, and retail, we have a couple different categories that are made up in those. But we can look at crime across these different types of business verticals or home residents and see what crime's trending. So within our dashboard, this is the main slide that it comes up first to, or the main visualization point. At the top, you can see just the broad counts that we're looking at. In the middle, you can start to see crime by month and year. Start on the left, you have 2022, then going to the right, the darker blue, you have 2024. Generally speaking, across most months, you're starting to see some decline in 2024, which is reflected in a lot of what we're seeing nationwide across sources. At the bottom, we have a temporal heat map that has day of the week and hour of the day. It gives you a reflection of truly hot time points. Now, if we wanted to get into it, you can see the filters that we have on the right by year, by location type, and that speaks to the NIBRS location type. We can get into specific crime categories, and specifically, if we wanted to just look at one of the 14 cities, we can do all of those selections in here. So on the second page of our dashboard, we get into just broad changes, and we're looking at percent change. So in the middle here, you can see some of the quarterly comparisons, and then on the far right, you can see year-to-date 2023 to year-to-date 2024. So we're seeing about a 2% reduction across all crime types across the 14 cities so far. Now, if we change this based on location type, so if we were only interested in retail and say shoplifting or larceny, that would look very different than everything as a whole. This is aggregate data itself versus slicing it to look at specific relationships in crime occurrence. Across the bottom, similar, we have hour of the day, and there's some temporal patterns, and then on the right, we have time of day. Now, we do have other pages within our dashboard that are internal facing. I'll speak to those, and if there is interest in it, please feel free to reach out to us. But really, those detailed percent change is looking at significant change. So just because there is a percent change does not always mean that's a significant change. We added in some significant tests to see, is this a meaningful increase or decrease in crime occurrence itself? If that's of interest, feel free to reach out, but I won't cover that in this presentation today. As an example, though, what you see in front of you is we selected out retail and we're looking at burglary. Now you can see that there's some temporal patterns to it. That's obviously seen on the bottom left with hour of the day. Not shocking, we're looking at retail burglary. So if you're thinking about when people are not in retail, it's your early morning hours. So that's where you do see that increase when there's likelihood of not getting caught, or so they perceive that risk. It's different at that time point. Overall, though, you can see that in Q3 2024, if we're just looking across everything, it is way down in 2024 compared to 2023 and 2022 for many of the months. Now, if we change this and say we're interested in now healthcare, you can see similar patterns at this time point. We still see a drastic reduction in burglary in 2024, similar early morning temporal wise in terms of when the frequency is the greatest for it. And as a whole, just to summarize this a bit more, you can see that change from 22 to 23. On the left, we have retail. On the right, we have healthcare, and both had significant reductions in that. This is what makes it a bit easier having it a dashboard to where we can see quick trends. So when Q4 ends, so early January, we can go collect the data, update our dashboard, and speak across these 14 cities and different types of premises itself on current trends. What are we seeing in the prior year itself? Additionally, to illustrate, retail larceny is a pretty good one to always look at. And not surprisingly, one of the big ones that people are oftentimes interested in, and even in Q3 2024, we are seeing about a 10% increase in retail larceny. That's even reflected month by month if you look at the middle graph here. And not shockingly, if you look at hour of the day, it's reflecting general hours of when stores are open. So truly larceny, if you think about when they're being caught or when stores are operating, we know that there's certain time points here, especially early afternoon, that we're seeing that. Then there was a reduction overnight when not as many stores are open across these 14 cities. Now, if we take that similar approach, we want to look at larceny. Let's go back and look at healthcare. Very different here. There's actually about a 10%, 9 to 10% reduction in overall larceny at healthcare facilities in Q3 2024 so far. Similar temporal patterns, but you see more of a spike early in the morning when they're first opening, and then it slowly declines over time. And you, again, can see across each calendar month for 2024, you're seeing a slight reduction in going into September itself. So again, two very different premises itself, going in very opposite directions. Retail larceny is going up, while you have healthcare larceny going down. That's why we have a powerful dashboard that allows us to sort, filter pretty quickly. So that's where if anyone is interested in seeing a demo of this or seeing a live access portal to it, please reach out, let us know. We can kind of go over this. We'll have updated regular videos and quarterly reports to that. More broadly speaking, though, one of the last slides we want to kind of end on is when we're thinking about crime and analyzing crime, there's a multitude of factors that can go into it. And this is a slide that I've used before, the things that go through my mind from a place-based perspective of what could affect crime. I'm taking a place-based approach, so I think spatially in that sense. So some of the big ones, population, weather, household, business, the history itself, the built environment. These are not exhaustive lists. These are just some of the big ones that do come up in conversations and research that we oftentimes think about could impact or affect crime occurrence at certain places. At the end of the day, one of the best predictors of future crime is still prior crime. So we build these advanced models, but at the end of the day, a good predictor to understand future risk is still prior risk. So we want to look at what's affecting that prior risk and these other factors with the built, business, household, weather, population, and a multitude of other factors provides our contextual value of what's creating that risk profile for higher crime and lower crime areas. Thanks for watching. Access our full crime statistics report compiled by our crime experts by scanning the QR code. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. If there's any questions, please reach out to me, Grant Jarvis. We have a great team here of crime experts. Happy to use them to answer any of your questions. Thanks. Bye.